Welcome back to Mindful Money. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and always tuning in, our regular listeners as well as new listeners. As we do every week, we have a giveaway. You know what that giveaway is, Sam?
I have no idea, Eric, but I'm on pins and needles. In fact, hold on. All
right. Are you really ready now?
I'm ready.
You might faint. We are going to allow our listeners to take the Retirement Readiness Quiz, our proprietary quiz, and in addition to that, have a 15-minute consultation with one of our advisors to go over the data. Just exactly what we're talking about today is not only to look at the data, but then to talk about the practicality, the psychological ramifications. To do that, go onto our website, mindfulmoneyshow.com, drop us a line. Again, that's mindfulmoneyshow.com. All right, let's keep talking. Let's maybe look at one of the other questions in the quiz. We just talked about sustainable withdrawal rates. Well, here's a good one. It's super related, and this is a super pathos-driven thing. How would you, not you, but how would someone rate themselves with this statement? I or we are confident our portfolio principal will not be depleted during retirement.
Mm-hmm.
People have thoughts on that, right?
Well, they do. And I think the first part, and this is kind of what we were alluding to earlier in the show, is I think with so many of these questions, we first have to anchor it in what we're actually talking about, right? We know that one of the biggest concerns that many people have with respect to retirement is depleting the principal. In essence, if you think about it, your assets that you accumulated are the engine that help provide the income that sustains your lifestyle. And so theoretically, and not really theoretically, practically, if that engine is gone, if those assets are gone, then you lose the ability to maintain the ability to create the income that you were living off of, right? So there's a diminished quality of life that ensues as a result of that. And so what most people are trying to figure out is what is the rate at which I can consume and spend the assets I have to do all the things that I want to do, but never put myself in jeopardy of losing the ability to generate more future income and put myself in a tough spot. The reality, though, is that complete depletion of principal is not the definition of failure. And this is another area where I think a lot of the technical analysis that our industry really teaches advisors to use is somewhat misguided. Because we act as though as long as people have some money left over, that they're in a good spot. And theoretically, what we're basically saying is there is no difference between you having $1 million in investments and you having 100,000 in investments, provided that you spend 20,000 a year and you're old enough that, you know, maybe you'll be dead in the next 3 or 4 years, right? And if you say it that way, you're kind of like, I don't know if that quite sounds right, but that's really the way that we design many retirement models. The reality, though, is that just as impactful as complete depletion of principal is partial depletion of principal far enough that you hit what we call the psychological cliff. See, what happens to a lot of people in retirement is that way before they actually consume all their assets, they know where they started, and they may wake up one day and be at a lower balance, you know, due to withdrawals that they've taken, poor market performance, whatever it might be. And something internally just triggers. It's kind of that self-preservation mode might trigger, and they kind of have this internal panic, right? And they realize, well, gee, if I keep going, I might run out of money. And way before they ever do, you'll see people go into behavior modification, where they start to cut things out of their life in a way to try to reduce their footprint so that they slow the erosion of what they're spending so that they never get too far to where they're really, really uncomfortable with what they have left in the bank or left in their investments. And the problem is nobody can tell you ahead of time when you're going to trip that psychological tripwire. So for some people, you know, if they're at 1 million, when they get down to 700,000, it might snap in. For other people, if they start at 1 million, it might be down when they're at 300,000. The reality is we don't really know, and it happens subconsciously. And so you can't really be prepared for it either. It's this slow erosion of confidence that I can freely spend money whenever I want to, however I want to, and have no concerns or worries about it. And one of the biggest issues that we have is that the way that the math works, it almost sets us up to fall into this trap sooner or later. And the reality is, because if you look at a lot of distribution processes, in the initial phases of retirement, people may be pulling money out, and they'll often, unless it just happens to be poor market timing, still see their balances growing even as you're taking withdrawals out. And that gives us this false sense of complacency of, well, gee, I could do this forever. It seems like it's an infinite bank and I just keep pulling money out, but I always got more left than when I do. But as they're doing that, they're actually very subtly changing and shifting the characteristics of what's remaining in the portfolio. And the reason for that is because little by little, as they're taking money out, because they're not making new contributions into it, they're actually starting to deplete the quantity of shares that they have. And those remaining shares have grown in value. So it's kind of like you have this basket of balls. The quantity of balls is getting smaller, but each ball is getting larger in size. And so when you look at like the total volume of the balls, maybe it's larger than what it was before, but you're actually concentrating more and more risk in the need for more and more performance on this constantly shrinking quantity of shares or balls that somebody may have. And so sooner or later, when there ends up being a period of negative returns, they're going to have to hyper accelerate the rate at which they're depleting those shares. And when they start to recover, it's kind of like being in quicksand and you can't quite get out of